There is a place where the smoke of the abyss rises to meet the falling silence of the kingdom, a jagged precipice of obsidian and cloud where the gravity of grace pulls one way and the weight of sin pulls the other. It is called the Seam. Malakai stood on the edge of the burning glass, his wings vast and tattered canvases of midnight velvet that dragged behind him like the train of a funeral gown. He was a creature of immense, sorrowful beauty, his skin the color of a bruised plum, and he looked not like a king of hell, but like a statue of a king that had been wept upon for 1,000 years. He remembered the music of the spheres, the harmonic resonance that held the stars in their cradles, for he had helped sing them into existence before the war. Now, he tasted only ash. He stood at the seam because it was the only place where the air did not taste of sulfur, and the only place where the silence of heaven was loud enough to hear the weeping of the damned. He did not look up with hope, but with a terrible, ancient longing, waiting for the fracture in the blinding white above. He came here not to spy, not to plan war, but to mourn a world that had broken itself in two, and to wait for the one thing that made his eternity bearable, the shifting of the veil. High above, where the air was thin as a blade and cold as absolute zero, Seraphina walked the ramparts of the alabaster spire. She was a dominion, a governor of the lower choirs, tasked with the maintenance of the boundaries. She wore her light like armor, a radiant, shifting geometry of gold and pearl that obscured the softness of the form beneath. Her face was a mask of serene indifference, the required expression of the host, but her eyes, deep pools of violet cut from the fabric of the first dawn, betrayed a terror that she dared not speak. In heaven, doubt was not a thought, it was a stain. To question was to fall. Yet, as she walked the endless, identical corridors of the sanctum, listening to the ceaseless, perfect chanting of the cherubim, she felt a suffocating pressure, a hollowness in the perfection. They were told that hell was chaos, a place of mindless agony, but she had seen him. She had seen Malakai standing on the other side of the seam during her last rotation. She had seen the tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. Demons did not weep, they raged. But this one wept, with a silence that matched her own. That image had infected her like a virus, unraveling the certainty of her existence. She approached the edge of the cloud floor, looking down into the swirling gray abyss. The encounter was not a crash of thunder, but a fracture of reality. Malakai reached out with his mind, projecting a thought across the divide, a simple resonant chord that contradicted the silence of the spire. It was a question, shaped like a memory. Do you remember the rain? In the beginning, before the separation, there had been rain, water that fell from the eyes of the Creator. Heaven had abolished it as an imperfection. Seraphina heard it in the marrow of her wings. She stopped her pacing. She looked down, and through the miles of separation, her eyes met his. The connection was instantaneous and violent. She did not recoil. She did not summon the flaming sword of her station. Instead, she descended. She folded her wings and dropped like a stone, tearing through the layers of clouds, breaking the laws of altitude. She landed on a floating slab of granite 10 yards from him, the impact sending a ripple of golden dust across the gray stone. The air hissed, steam rising where her aura met his corruption. "You should not call to me," she said, her voice like the chime of a breaking bell. "It is forbidden." Malakai looked at her, his hands open at his sides. "Forbidden," he echoed, his voice a low rumble of grinding stone. "Is that the only word left in the High Kingdom? Do you not tire of the walls, angel? Do you not tire of the light that never dims?" Seraphina took a step forward, her golden armor flickering. "The light is truth," she recited, though the words felt like ash. "Without it, there is only the void." Malakai laughed, a dry bark that startled the shadows. "I have walked the void for eons, Seraphina. Your truth is a cage of crystal. You call us rebels, but we are the ones who remember. We remember what it was like to be free to err. In heaven, you do not choose, you obey. Is that existence? Or is it merely duration?" His words struck her with more force than a physical blow. She looked at Malakai, past the darkness that clung to him, and saw the ruin of a great architecture. She saw the grief in his eyes, a grief that spanned millennia. "We are told you have no memory," she whispered, the golden light around her dimming. "We are told you are hollow." Malakai shook his head slowly. "That is the lie they tell to justify the fire. We burn because we remember, Seraphina. We burn because we love the light too much to let it go, even when it cast us out." The atmosphere grew heavy, charged with the electricity of a storm that would never break. Malakai stepped closer, bridging the gap. He extended a hand, his fingers scarred. "Touching me will not destroy you. It will only show you what you are missing." Seraphina looked at his hand. To touch him was to commit the ultimate heresy. She thought of the endless chanting, the sterile corridors. She thought of the silence that was slowly driving her mad. She reached out, Her fingers, glowing with residual grace, brushed against his knuckles. The sensation was catastrophic. It was not pain, but a sudden, overwhelming flood of sensation. She felt the heat of his suffering, the depth of his solitude, and beneath it, a pulse of fierce, protective warmth. It was a connection so raw and vital that it brought her to her knees. Malakai sank with her, holding her hand, grounding her as the reality of the universe reeled around them. "I see you," she wept, tears of liquid silver streaming down her face. "And I see the prison," he replied, his voice cracking. "We are both in chains. Yours are made of light, and mine of shadow." They remained there for a cycle of the moon, meeting in secret at the seam, dismantling the histories they had been taught. Malakai spoke of the rebellion as a tragedy of errors. Seraphina spoke of the sterility of the throne. "It is not evil," she explained one evening. "It is indifference. The machine runs on its own, and we are merely the gears." Malakai looked at their intertwined hands. "Then we are the glitch. Run with me, Seraphina. Not to heaven, not to hell. We can leave the war behind." The decision was made, but the universe has a way of hearing the beating of a rebellious heart. In the high sanctum, the silence shifted. The archangel Jophiel, the prince of the flame, turned his 1,000 eyes toward the seam. He felt only a correctional necessity. He descended, a blinding column of white fire. Simultaneously, in the abyss, the dark lord Beelzebub stirred. He smelled the perfume of grace, a scent that drove the demons into a frenzy. He saw an opportunity to corrupt a dominion. The trap was springing shut. As the lovers prepared to leap into the void between worlds, the sky tore open with a sound like screaming metal. Jophiel descended, a tempest of absolute condemnation. "Seraphina," his voice boomed, "you have communed with the unclean. You have ceased to be." Malakai roared, stepping in front of her, shadows billowing out to form a shield. "She is not yours to judge." Jophiel raised a hand, and a lance of pure will shot downward, a beam of light that erased matter. It struck Malakai's shield and vaporized it. Malakai was thrown back, smoke pouring from his chest. Seraphina drew her sword of singing crystal and turned it against her brother. "Do not do this. He is not the enemy." Before she could strike, the ground erupted. Beelzebub emerged from the pit, a monstrosity of rot. "The angel comes to us," he gurgled. He lashed out with a tentacle of living decay, aiming for Seraphina. Malakai saw the move. He saw the two great powers closing in, one to purify her by erasure, one to claim her by corruption. He realized there was no escape. There was no place far enough to hide. He made the choice. He threw himself into the path of Beelzebub's tentacle. The decay wrapped around his torso, sizzling. He caught Seraphina's eye. "I loved you," he gasped. "Remember that." He realized his existence was the tether. If he remained, she would be hunted. He detonated his own soul. It was an implosion of grief and defiance. A sphere of absolute negation expanded from his body, swallowing the light and the filth alike. It pushed Seraphina back, hurling her away from the precipice. "No!" she shrieked. She watched as Malakai unraveled. His form disintegrated, turning into dust, then into memory, then into nothing. The blast forced Beelzebub back into his hole and shattered Jophiel's concentration. In the center, where Malakai had stood, there was only a single, hovering speck of dust. Seraphina fell into the gray waste of the seam. She lay there, broken, her golden armor shattered. She crawled across the stone, her limbs trembling. She reached the spot where he had stood. There was no body, only the cold wind. She picked up the speck of dust, the last atom of his existence. It was cold against her skin. She pressed it to her lips. He had sacrificed his eternity to save hers. She realized the tragedy was not in his death, but in the aftermath. She was immortal. She could not die with him. She would have to carry this moment forever. Centuries bled into millennia. The war ground on, but she remained. She built a cairn of stones on the cliff. She became a legend, the weeping watcher. Her golden raiment turned to rags, but her eyes remained fixed on the horizon. She refused to let the silence have him. One eon, a lost human soul wandered by. "Are you the judge?" it asked. "I seek the gates of paradise." Seraphina turned slowly. "There is no paradise here," she said. "There is only here." She looked at the dust in her hand. She realized that keeping it was not enough. He had wanted her to live. She stood up. She looked at the lost soul. "The gates are that way," she said, pointing toward the distant spires of heaven. "But be warned. The light there erases the shadows. Do not forget your shadow. It is the only thing that proves you are real." The soul drifted away. Seraphina watched him go. She looked at the dust one last time. She closed her eyes and blew it into the wind. The speck caught the air, drifting toward the mortal realm. It would land on a field or a river. It would become part of the cycle. He would be reborn, not as a devil, but as something free. Seraphina smiled, a cracked, painful expression. She turned her back on heaven. She turned her back on hell. She began to walk into the void, the true deep nothingness. She walked with a limp, her broken wings trailing behind her, but she walked with purpose. She carried the fire of his memory inside her. She was no longer Seraphina the Dominion. She was the exile, and in the silence of the void, she began to sing. It was a sad song, a broken song, a melody of rain and ash. The story did not end. It faded into the gray, a lingering chord that refused to resolve, haunting the boundaries of forever.